Okay, hello, Brewster. So a couple of questions after your invited talk. So I checked before your CV on the web, and it looks like that it's, well, certainly it's very impressive, and the moves or the steps you were making from 80s on, it looks like that you were choosing always a pretty important step in the development of the web. First it was this voice service, later on it was Alexa, which again is, well, everybody's using this for checking.
Tracking, yes, mostly for web use.
Exactly, yeah, nowadays at least, yeah. And now recently this Internet Archive, which I think is one of the major internet projects nowadays. So one quick question would be, what would be the next step, or will the story stop with Internet Archive?
The next step is to build a library. So the whole idea of this, I think the opportunity that we saw back in the 70s and 80s was to build the great library again, Library of Alexandria version 2. If we can go and build a library of everything, this would be great. But we were missing almost everything at that time. We didn't have computer systems that worked very well at all. And then we needed to get publishing online. So first was to try to get the computers going, and I helped with some of that with supercomputers and things, but mostly that happened by others. Then there's getting this open network to be able to be used for publishing. It may sound funny, but this was not always a given. This was before the World Wide Web, and so I helped with the early systems for publishing on the net. But once that was going in 1994, then we could start to build the library. But we thought we'd start building it by getting enormous collections together. And that's an archive. But archives are not very organized. They're sort of big collections of stuff. So our next thing we've got to do is a library. With a library, you expect things to be useful or to be complete, and to have help on being able to use it, good access tools. And now the next step is to build access tools to these enormous collections, which is the net. And the search engines, to their credit, have been doing a great job so far, but we need to take either further steps than that, whether like Alexa with recommendation systems or semantic web, different new ideas on how to use these materials. I'm very interested in how do we get 1,000 living languages that are the living languages of the world. There are actually more than that, but if you take the ones that have maybe a critical mass, maybe it's 1,000 living languages. How do we make it so that the people that are speaking those prosper by being different? How do we have cultural diversity stay in this technological world? Because there's this question, will it all become English language, or does it all become Americanism or something awful like this? No, how do we go and have 1,000 cultures and 1,000 living languages be actively supported with our technologies?
So would this, so this is a very good point actually. So currently the activities which you, at least how I see them, are still a little bit centralized because they need to be centralized at this time point. But let's say covering 1,000 cultures would mean somehow to incentivize them somehow and somehow to bootstrap.
Innately distributed, because we want people to think differently. And only in that way will we be strong.
Did you do already some steps in this direction? Because this would be, I think, the very critical point.
No, we're mostly suffering the problems of not having it. So whenever you do that, the next step, you go and say, well, that was the obvious thing, and then you find what are the big problems that are next. For instance, we're digitizing all of these books, but only the major languages have optical character recognition. So you can search major languages. But what about all the rest? There's no financial incentive to do all the Mayan languages in South America, or the Balinese, or important cultural, but not financially viable. So how can we use our collective technology and networking and people skills that are now able to be put together using this internet to help build a library that is very, very diverse. So it's not just training people on better engineering programs, important, or how to do better agriculture or green technology or very important things. But how do we, by the time we die or the time our children die, that there's still 1,000 active languages that are being used is now, I think, one of our big challenges. One of the things we may have done with this internet technology is homogenized, has made fewer voices or fewer kinds of voices. This we must correct. We must correct immediately.
So how do you get response, let's say, from community? You must be bombarded with questions and opinions and so on all the time. So how all this activity or endeavor would be perceived by different communities actually where moving through. So on one side you have publishers, on the other side you have maybe geeks, on the third side you would have digital librarians and cultural workers and so on. So what would be the echo from the world on all these activities?
I've been surprised at some communities, some professions adopt this digital world much more rapidly than others. And some are very, very slow. Publishers, newspaper publishers were very fast. Book publishers, very slow. The libraries, very slow, which I find very surprising. This should be the librarian's day. Right? This is perfect for them. Yet, it's not going anywhere near as fast as really we need it to happen. Governments, some and some and some, it depends on who's in power. When during the 1980s, and was going very slowly. 1990s, in the United States, there was a great deal of enthusiasm about internet technologies and knowledge and education. And then in the 2000s in the United States, it's all gone back to war and other priorities than what
so you
want.
mentioned before your European archive and European programs, which are also quite active. So Europe is spending in the range of, I don't know, 100 million euro or 50 million euro per year, roughly, on digital libraries. So would you feel this activity on the European side, interest and involvement?
There is quite a bit of activity now in the digital library, in the semantic web area in Europe. There's a real question of how open it will be. We've seen a long tradition of doing digital projects that end up with good cataloging, but without putting the materials up. And if the materials do get digitized, they get put in some interface that it makes it impossible to reuse. So I think we need to establish a new qualification of what does open mean. It doesn't just mean that it's on a web page that you can go and use. It means that you can use it in bulk for research and education. So if you wanted to take all of the books in Hungarian, or you wanted to do news reports that were in Hebrew, or if you wanted to do, then you want to be able to get thousands and then download those and do your new work on it. That's what digital research is all about. And we in the library world must allow some more access to these materials, or it will all be for naught.
I agree, yeah. I'm spotting these problems as well. But still, I mean, spotting these problems on the European project side, but still, there are several levels of what library means. So on the one side you have really archiving, preservation and so on. Then you have all of these cultural levels, and on the other side you have patterns of use of these materials, where you can maybe already start talking about the knowledge.
Yes.
So can you give some thoughts maybe on what patterns of use do you expect, let's say, in the future, which would appear on the top of such huge archives? Because it won't be just simple search, keyword search. cannot be
No.
too complex.
It's too complex. So we have to work backwards from what use we want to make of these. Whether it's going to be for deep researchers or it's going to be for doing education, maybe K through 12 or university type education, which I think actually is an area that in the next 5 years we should make sure we do a good job of. So that we have good online materials for those that want to learn something and they don't know anything about it yet. So if you wanted to learn calculus, but you're in a town that does not teach it, how can we make it so that people can do this? So that might be videos. Some people work well with learning with video. It would require some texts, some textbooks type things, but also community of other people that are doing it too. To say, hey, you know, I got this too, you know, and then you can be fun, even though they may be geographically distinct. If we can go and take a couple of areas of use, maybe it's in the education area, another would be in bringing access to the books that are in our libraries. Maybe this is another. So we know that our children, and often ourselves, we're using Wikipedia for almost everything. But sometimes, what if we want something deeper? We want to know about that, but we want to know what other people had to say. It was not just the Wikipedia view.
Sure.
Not that Wikipedia is bad, but let's say we wanted deeper. Why don't we use Wikipedia as a launch point into the books and audio and video that are in our existing libraries, not just the metadata in our libraries. Now it's easy to get to the catalogs, but yuck, nobody wants the catalog, they want it now. And either they need it sent to them as a physical book or scan on demand. We think scan on demand might be a good use. So if you go to a web page and it says, here's this book, but it's not online yet, you say, scan it. And it's now you can then take that off the shelf, put it, and in 2 days it will be on the internet. There's some rights issues. How do you loan it in such a way that people don't abuse this? But I think this is an exciting, we can open the great libraries of the world to anybody with a curiosity on the web. This, I think, might be another application. I don't know. I think we start with these applications and then we go and say, okay, what are the technologies needed to build it?
So maybe in the line of what you said, so the technologies which are developed well, in the semantic web community and also related communities can help a lot, I guess, to...
Oh, absolutely.
So currently, well, there are at least a couple of initiatives which are all more or less in the same line, how to structure the unstructured data, which would appear in archives like yours. So this would be, well, the initiative from Vulkan, DBpedia, for instance, Psych, again, somehow it's really, so technologies which used to be developed in 80s somehow got relevant again. So did you already make any experiments in this direction, somehow how to extract this kind of knowledge and not just give materials or content, but really provide the knowledge servers, not just content servers?
We're trying a project called the Open Library, which is using the semantic web technology plus wiki technology and trying to marry the two.
So top-down and bottom-up
technologies.
Guess.
And try to make a single system that works. The technology leader for this is Aaron Schwartz, who's a very smart man, doing work in the RDF world and this sort of thing. And he's been trying to, he's been pulling together an open source project around this. An open library is now a framework that is completely open source, that has a tuple-based database that has history, plus an open template system to bring a wiki-like user interface to this sort of semantic world and trying to make the right balance there. I don't know that we've done the right balance, but there's an interesting project there. And we want not only that project, but we'd like to help other people's projects, whether they join or separate. We just want the use of these materials to increase.
Where is this project placed, and what would be, let's say, for people maybe from this community or related communities. There are many more analytic communities, text miners,
Yes.
semantic web, NLP guys, and so on. How they would be able to provide any input for such a project? What would be practical way for them to step in or contribute?
A way of contributing to these, specifically to the Open Library project, is very well designed for this. It's an open source project. If you go to openlibrary.org, there are mailing lists. There's an open repository with subversion of all of the code. The databases, the underlying databases, can be downloaded in bulk. So people can go and take them and try them. The user interface is able to be changed with a wiki interface. I think this is interesting. Wiki code. So with wiki code, you can make it so that people that do not want to invest a month or a year, but they want to shape something, they can go in and change how a certain area of the site looks. And I think this is a way of having the site evolve. Not only the data get better, but the user experience get better. So the Open Library is designed to help people that want to spend 5 minutes to correct something, a day or two to correct a user interface, or months to go and download the code and add to the code base. So the Open Library is trying in this area.
Very interesting. So, yeah, well, I would say thanks more or less for this discussion.
Well, thank you very much.
This is, I mean, at least your activities is something which not even knowing you would be easy to spot on the web, and I guess this will continue in this
this is a
direction.
fabulous meeting here at the Semantic Web in 2007. I think we're on the cusp of being able to bring order to enormous quantities of information. I thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay, perfect.